2. If we could please call the roll.
Commissioner Markham is absent with notice. Long?
Here.
Commissioner Powell is absent with notice. Commissioner Cavalla is absent with notice. Commissioner Charles?
Present.
Wypert?
Here.
Hoffman?
Present.
Rahman?
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Commissioner Wypert, if you could do the honors and lead us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So next up is our approval of the minutes dated for March 15th. Are there any corrections to the minutes? All right, hearing none, I will accept a motion to approve the minutes for March 15th.
I will move to
All right,
approve.
motion by Commissioner Smith-Charles, seconded by Commissioner Long. Please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, very good, thank you. All right. I will now accept a motion to approve the agenda as presented for today. All right, moved by Commissioner Hoffman, seconded by Commissioner Smith-Charles. You can please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on, next we have public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the committee to speak about any items on the agenda today? All right, hearing none, I'll close our first public comment. Moving on to communications, I will accept a motion to receive and file the communication item, which is item A, CEO Pontiac's Oakland County Fiscal Year Report for 2022. All right, motion by Commissioner Long, seconded by Commissioner Smith-Charles. Please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, perfect, thank you. All right, moving on. Next, we have department recommendations. 8A, we have indigent defense, application to Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, MIDC, for indigent criminal defense services. If I get a motion, please.
I'll move it.
All right. By Commissioner Wypert, seconded by Commissioner Hoffman. All right, very good. And we have Mr. Mena here.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. With me is Paulette Lofton, who has just been hired and is officially starting on Monday as the chief of our internal public defender's office. So very exciting. That's part of this year's plan. I do have a PowerPoint that Pam was gracious enough to put up on the screen that I'll go through, but I know that there's a lot of brain power in this room and you've got a very busy agenda. So if you need to cut me off and just vote on this thing, by all means, don't hesitate to. So I'm going to start, while Pam's pulling this up, that every year we have to come to this committee and ultimately the full board to apply for and then eventually accept a grant from the state to fund our indigent defense system. So that's what we're doing today. This is our yearly grant. We're statutorily required to do this every year. There's a state statute called the MIDC Act, and the MIDC is a branch of state government under Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. They set standards that we have to comply with, and then we tell them, in effect, this is how much money we will need to comply with those standards, and the state is supposed to give us a grant in that amount of money. The word system has a very specific meaning under the MIDC Act, and it's tied to the concept of funding units. And so because the county funds the Oakland County Circuit Court, and the 4 divisions of the 52nd District Court, that is our indigent defense system. That's what the county is responsible for. And so that means that we have to provide attorneys for anyone who is charged with a felony in the entire county, doesn't matter what court they originate in, or anyone charged with a misdemeanor in the 52nd District Court. Anyone who is indigent in any of those courts, meaning that they can't afford to hire an attorney of their own. These are our approximate monthly appointment numbers, just so you can get an idea of how busy our system is. This is monthly, so we generate about 20 capital felony appointments a month. Those are felonies that are punishable by life in prison. 350 non-capital felony appointments, 125 probation violation appointments, and 250 misdemeanor appointments. And we also provide an arraignment attorney every day in each of the divisions of the 52nd District Court, and 3 daily arraignment attorneys in the Oakland County Jail to handle arraignments in all of the courts throughout Oakland County. So this is a very busy, we've got a lot of people who are very busy every day. We also provide expert and investigator funding in our system. So this is, has been a change within the last couple of years, that all requests for experts or investigators are centralized in our office in Indigent Defense Services. Just to give you a historical sort of comparison, for FY22, we had 34 requests for investigators for about $34,000. That's all of FY22. Already in FY23, we're at 37 requests and already have hit that 34,000. So I'm expecting us to be, if not quite double this year, pretty close. And so we're getting a lot of money out the door for that. When it comes to experts, last year, FY22, 45 requests with $150,000 committed, and already this fiscal year, we're at 33 requests, $92,000. The reason that we exist in Indigent Defense Services is MIDC Standard 5, which took effect in the fall of 2021. All of the functions that I just talked about, from appointing attorneys, providing expert and investigator funding, all of that used to be under the control of the court. So if it was a felony case, circuit court had to appoint the attorneys, had to pay for it out of their budget. If it was a district court, same thing, district court paid for it. Now the court is completely out of the business of appointing attorneys or approving expert or investigator funding. That all comes through our office in Indigent Defense Services. And it comes out of our budget, which again is largely funded by a state grant. So one of the big changes that we're making this year, and the reason that I wanted to introduce Paulette, historically, we've used a roster of independent contractor attorneys solely. That's the way that we have provided Indigent Defense Service probably for the last 30-plus years. Right now, we've got about 175 attorneys on that roster. And what we're moving to now is a hybrid model where the vast majority of our cases are still going to be handled by that independent roster of attorneys. But we've also created an internal public defender's office, which is going to be staffed by Oakland County employees who will take on a percentage of that caseload. Right now, given the staffing level that we anticipate that they'll have this year, which will be about 5 to 7 attorneys, we anticipate that that'll be about 5% of the overall caseload. So it's not going to be a huge number to start. As this office grows, which we fully intend it to do over the next several years, we hope that we can get that percentage up. This is how we hope to use the Public Defender's Office. So we are not going to use this as just a random distribution of caseload. This is not a situation where every 20th case that comes in my door to appoint, well, that's 5% every 20th case, so that's going to go to Paulette in her office. That's not the way to run a system, and it doesn't make sense. So we want to use the Public Defender's Office strategically to target those areas of our system where we know we have problems, Overly complex felony cases where we really can't staff that with multiple roster attorneys, but a public defender's office could pull in those resources and put multiple attorneys on that file. Felony cases where maybe the defendant has not gotten along with their appointed attorney and has gone through 4, 5, 6 attorneys. And we're really at a point where we're saying, Judge, if you allow this attorney to withdraw, the 6th or 7th attorney, I don't know that I can find you an 8th attorney who's willing to take this case. Well, not to say that we're going to force that on the public defender's office, but you're a county employee, so you're going to take the case and you're going to try to work it the best that you can. And then in some of our district courts, you know, we have seen areas where we could really beef up our misdemeanor representation. I think sometimes because our felonies are so serious, people forget that misdemeanors really matter too. And in fact, most of the people that experience the criminal legal system at all are probably experiencing it at the misdemeanor level. And it can cause a significant toll on people even if they're locked up for 3 days, you know, over the weekend because they couldn't get a bond that they could post. That can have a serious detrimental impact on people's lives. So we're hoping to be able to target some of that misdemeanor system too. This grant process slide, I'm sorry, I've already talked about the grant process slide, so I'm going to skip that one. Next one is what our submission looks like. So this year, one of the main changes that we're seeing from the state for FY24 is MIDC Standard 8. And what that means is we're going to have to start paying all of our roster attorneys an hourly rate. Currently, most things in our system, other than capital cases, which we are paying hourly right now, but other than that, most things are paid on a fee structure. So if you do X, Y, and Z on a case, you get this much money regardless of how much time you spend. That's not really a great way to run a system. And so with MIDC Standard 8 next year, we will be paying all attorneys hourly based on the work that they do on their cases. So we'll be asking, and actually this slide is even slightly out of date because these numbers are constantly changing. Our actual grant request to the state will probably be more in the realm of $20 million. Our current year's grant is $14 million, but keep in mind that next year we have the addition of a few more employees in the public defender's office, but also really it's this change moving to MIDC Standard 8 and figuring out how much money that's going to cost us to pay all of these attorneys an hourly rate. The county, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back because this is important. So we have a local share in the county, which is set by statute. And our local share is approximately 1.8 million. It goes up every year by inflation or 3%, whichever's less. But one of the key points is that currently it does not compound. And so this local share that's on the screen, 1,883,620.74, under the way the statute is currently written, that's the highest that it will ever be. And so we kick in that amount every year from the county general fund, and then anything over and above that is the state grant funding. And then we also submit, we're required to submit quarterly compliance reports to the MIDC. This is everything that our budget funds. So that big piece is the attorney fees owed to independent contractor attorneys. The expert investigator fees that I talked about, 10 employees of my office, 12 employees eventually, once she gets them hired, of Paulette's office. We have 3 ancillary employees currently in our budget. One is a corrections deputy that manages the daily jail arraignments, and then 2 are community corrections specialists, pretrial services officers, who meet with all of the people who are scheduled to be arraigned that day. We also provide continuing legal education for the appointed attorneys. We do that through a contract with the Oakland County Bar Association. So that's included. And of course, all other miscellaneous things too, office supplies, bar dues for all of the attorneys, memberships to the State Appellate Defenders Criminal Law Resource Center. But these are the main buckets. This is the standard slide, which I've already talked about, so I'll skip over that. These are what our proposed hourly rates will be for next year. So misdemeanors would be paid at the rate of $120 an hour. Low severity felonies, which is essentially anything punishable by 5 years or less, would be $132 an hour. High severity felonies, which is anything over 5 years and less than life, $144. And then capital felonies, $192. Now, these are higher than the MIDC's minimum rates. So this is, of course, subject to MIDC approval. I think we can make a very good case in Oakland County that in order to attract and retain the best quality of attorneys that we possibly can, we need to be one of the highest paying counties in the state. I mean, this tri-county area has attorneys that can make a lot of money in private practice, and if we are not paying them a higher rate, they will go elsewhere and find it. And so I'm hopeful that the MIDC will approve the rates that are on the screen right now. I don't know 100% that they will. But even if they don't, they will set a floor, a ceiling really, for the rates that we're required to pay. So it will still be hourly, one way or another. And that's my last slide. So hopefully I've given you at least a decent overview of our system in this limited time. Happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the presentation. Commissioner Hoffman?
Thank you guys very much, and I do appreciate this digital fund system we have set up, because unfortunately, if you don't have money, you don't get good representation. What do the other courts do? Like the 51st in Waterford, do they take it out of the general fund? Do they apply for grants?
So all of the non-52s are what's called third-class district courts, which is not really a great name, but
Don't
that's
tell them that.
that's what it says in the statute. It'd be nice if they changed the name, but that's what it says. Paulette actually used to manage 2 of those courts, Waterford, the one you mentioned, and Pontiac. And yes, that's exactly what they do. Their city or township has to do the same thing we're doing. Obviously, their local share is a lot lower because the system is smaller when you're talking about just that one court. But they do the exact same thing every year.
Okay, what is the advantage of in-house versus independent contractors?
Yeah. One of the main advantages is that ability to strategically target problem areas. And so there are schools of thought about in-house counsel will provide better representation than an independent contractor. I don't think that that's true across the board. Certainly that can be true, but we have independent contractor attorneys who do amazing work. But we can't force them to take cases. They're independent contractors. They can accept or reject. And with a base of employees, you can really use that office to say, hey, today we need to focus on this area. We need you to go do this. Tomorrow, we might have another problem pop up, and you can almost be a quick response force to go do that, versus an independent contractor who maybe they're willing to do that and maybe they're not.
Okay, last question. Hourly rate, that's for the independent contractors?
Correct.
But the county employees are on a salary or?
Correct. The county employees will all be on a salary commensurate with the prosecutor's office. So for instance, if you get hired in as a principal attorney working for Paulette, you're going to get the same amount of money as if you were a principal attorney working for Karen McDonald.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Smith-Rose?
Yeah, to just piggyback on that a bit, you get the same as the Karen McDonald office, but not the same as a private firm.
You would not make as much as you would if you were doing high-level retained work. I do think that it will be extremely competitive for people who are solo practitioners sort of going from place to place, I think our salary will be very competitive for those people.
I like that, thank you. So my two questions are, how do you determine someone qualifies as indigent? And the second question is, do the attorneys work in the same hour on different cases in terms of bookkeeping?
Yeah, that's, the second question is gonna be one of our biggest challenges next year, is preventing the contract attorneys from double billing. Not even intentionally, just even inadvertently, right? They're not allowed to double bill, so if you devote an hour of your time, you need to tell us which case you worked on. You can't charge an hour to multiple cases. And I apologize, I forgot the first question.
Yeah, how do you know that they qualify as indigent?
Indigent. So right now, the court determines indigency, and there are rules in MIDC Standard 9, it's loosely referred to as Standard 9. It's actually called the indigency standard. There are certain presumptions that make you indigent. So for instance, if you're under 200% of the federal poverty line.
How do you
if-
prove that? Like I've got a court date, how do I prove that?
You fill out a sheet.
Yeah.
All courts have them, and it makes you list, if you have a job, how long you've had the job, any type of assets, any type of bills that you have, if you receive any monthly assistance. So the court will then look at basically your financial sheet.
Good to know.
It's very hard to dig into that on a granular level if someone was truly just flat out lying.
Right,
I mean, quite frankly, a lot of this is taking people's word for it.
right, that's what I was thinking. Okay, those are my two, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Any other discussion? Commissioner Wiper?
On the 1,883,000 local share,
Yep.
you said that that's the cap? I mean, that's,
The way the statute is currently written, that is the most we could ever pay, yes.
okay. And so, but you're gonna go from 18 million to 20 million to maybe,
For the grant, you're,
yeah, right. And
Right.
that's,
Right.
so do you think at some point they're gonna review all the local shares?
well, I wouldn't be shocked if the state doesn't like the fact that the local share doesn't compound. I mean, if it compounded, we would be in a different position, but it doesn't. And I would leave it, I guess, to Corporation Council if they ever try to change the statute, whether that is legally permissible.
But that, I mean, it would take that.
They would have to change the statute, and they would have to say, now your local share compounds, so.
And last you guys are gonna now audit the hours? I mean, the system right now.
Correct.
On a per file thing,
Yep.
PDs have 20 files and they go handle them in 1 hour.
Yep.
And they're getting paid 20 files.
Well, and they definitely won't be able, yes, that will be a major
That-
audit point in our system, because they will not be able to do that.
Right.
People who are used to churning through multiple files in very limited time will make less money under this system. So they will need to either change their ways or be prepared to make significantly less money.
And to change the ways, the court is not changing its ways, so if court date is Wednesday and court's happening between 9 and noon, you still having 20 files, so if you've got,
Right.
you can have a big audit there.
Right. Well, and part of that is how much time you spent in court. So you could have spent 3 hours in court, but if you contacted all your clients before court, as you should be doing, if you got discovery from the prosecutor before court, which you should be doing, you could have 5 to 10 hours of prep time for that one docket. And so really, you spent 13 hours, even though only 3 of those were in court.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, let's go ahead and please prompt the vote to recommend to board.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, perfect.
Thank
Motion
you very
carries.
much.
Thank you so much.
Nice meeting everyone.
Thanks, you
Thank
guys.
Do you want me to leave this? Pam,
And you want
do
the
you want me to leave this?
thing up there?
Oh, yeah, just, we have another presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next, under department recommendations, we have the management and budget, creation of 1 financial services technician 3 position in the fiscal services reimbursement unit. And we have a presentation from Mr. Kyle Jun. I'll accept a motion to recommend this to the board. Commissioner Smith-Charles, seconded by Commissioner Long. Thank you.
All right, good morning. So the resolution before you, the title is a bit misleading. It actually deletes 8 full-time positions and 4 part-time positions, and then adds the 1 position that's referenced in the title. So it's a net reduction of staff of the 7 full-time positions and 4 part-time. This is occurring within the court reimbursement unit that's actually part of the fiscal services division that reports to me, so that's why I'm here to present it. So that's the action that's being taken today. This presentation is designed, so that you have the full context of how we got to the point that we have a lesser need for staff in the division. So I'm going to walk through fairly quickly here, so you have that context, but feel free to stop me. And I should say I'm here because, because I'm the department director. This initiative has been a team effort between, Barb Hankey at Public Service was going to help me present this. She's out of town. She's been integral. Mary Ann Yerge from Corp Counsel. Cheryl Johnson, the manager of fiscal services, and lastly Sean Monk, who's the chief over the reimbursement unit. So I don't want this to come across as something I did by myself. All right. So the action that was taken, by the county executive branch last September, as an administrative action that's led us to this point, was that effective October 1 of last year, the Oakland County Reimbursement Unit is no longer collecting any fees or assessments on juveniles who are going through the family court under our circuit court, other than those that are specifically and clearly required by state law. So the major categories that are no longer being collected are board and care assessments to families of children who are housed and treated at Children's Village, as well as probation service fees and defense attorney fees. You can see then the list of fees that are specifically required by state law that we continue to collect. We've stopped wage garnishments and tax intercepts for all those fees that we're no longer collecting for any past assessments. And again, I would just emphasize this is an administrative action, that we've taken under our authority as the county executive branch. We did provide a notice to all of you or those of you who were here last October to make sure you were in the loop at the time. So the largest category here that I'm going to focus on is the board and care charges at Children's Village. Some context: the rate is $169 per day. That's kind of the face value rate. That's the same rate that's technically charged to families as well as to other counties that contract with Oakland County to use bed space. The rate's been unchanged for 25 years. That charge is reduced, based on a calculation of ability to pay for families, or was reduced. I should be using the past tense here, using basically the same methodology as child support calculations. But even with those reductions, for a family that was making $25,000 a year, they were still being assessed $600 per month, which obviously over the course of a full year is over $7,000. The collection rate on this was extremely low, under 10%. And over the last 20 to 25 years, a total debt of $98 million had been built up. So then the last thing, and we'll talk about the full financial picture here at the end, the child care fund at the state level basically pays for 50% of our costs of operating Children's Village. These dollars were deducted, from that budget. So, for every dollar we collected, we lost 50 cents from the state. Just quickly on some of the harms that have been identified of this kind of, these kinds of assessments and debt through studies that have happened across the country. I'm not going to read these, but it's an assessment that doesn't really serve any purpose, in terms of these kids and these families trying to get their lives back on track. It creates equity issues in terms of the very high percentage of children at Children's Village who are black and brown youth. This is basically a debt that just stays with a family, forever. So, and Heather Calcaterra, oh, sorry, thank you.
Put you back to the beginning.
Heather Calcaterra, from Children's Village would tell you, this also prevents in cases families asking for assistance or families coming to visit their children because, they're not sure if someone's going to try to collect money from them, which obviously doesn't help in terms of stabilizing, that child's life. So I've got linked here two reports you can review, one at the national level and one report that was commissioned by our neighbors in Macomb 2 years ago. This action follows actions that a number of our neighbors have taken, including Macomb, Washtenaw, and Wayne. We've taken a lesson learned from Macomb, and that we're applying this action to neglect and abuse cases as well as delinquency cases. And this is, this does follow, a path and a trend that's happening at a state level in terms of it's consistent with recommendations from the Michigan Task Force on Juvenile Justice Reform issued last July, and there is legislation pending, that we expect to be taken up at some point in the current session in Lansing, that would basically, make this a statewide policy. All right, thank you, Cheryl. So this slide shows you the actual collections for the last 3 years of all these fees. The ones that are marked with blue are the ones that are no longer being collected. The ones marked with the green arrow are the things that are still being collected. You can see those are relatively small dollar amounts. And you can also see that board and care, which actually covers the first 3 lines, is the bulk of the revenue that has been collected successfully in the past. So in terms of impact on employees from this action, our reimbursement unit, obviously, if we're collecting less revenue, has fewer staff needed. We let the staff know as early as possible what was happening, back to last August, to give them as much time as possible for affected employees to find new positions. And, thankfully, between the work of Sean and our partners in HR, we have identified a position for all of these employees elsewhere in the county, so there will not be any layoffs required. The total savings from eliminating the positions, as well as operating and internal service costs associated with that, are over $800,000 a year. So the next slide shows the total financial impact here. So our reduced court collections are about $1.3 million. We have the over $800,000 in ongoing savings from reducing the size of the reimbursement unit, and then we will have an increase in child care fund reimbursement from the state. So all things taken into account, this is basically a net neutral change from a financial perspective And I should say that's starting next year with FY 2024 when everything's in place for a full year. So there is a loss of about $300,000 on a one-time basis this year. So I would just end with the three key takeaways from our perspective. We think ending these collections is a clear win for these children and their families to get their lives back on track. There's no significant financial loss to the county, and all affected employees have found new positions. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that the commissioners may have.
Perfect, thank you. Good presentation. Do we have any discussion? Commissioner Wong?
Thank you, Kyle. So my question is, it's not about the positions, but so there was that $98 million deficit. You said we got 50% reimbursed back from the state of that $98 million. Is that correct
So
for the
it's-
boarding? What happens to the other approximate $50 million debt?
Write it off.
So the $98 million is revenue that hasn't been collected, and kind of sits on the books. So our hope is that eventually we could work with the circuit court to potentially get that waived. That hasn't happened yet, or dismissed, whatever the technical term is. The 50% child care fund reimbursement is related to the revenue that we do collect right now.
Okay, so that
that's-
$98 million is going to remain on the books until something else changes. That
Correct.
we didn't get 50% of that reimbursed because that was never collected.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
It's
That's what I
it's
was
the
asking.
revenue that we were collecting.
Okay.
That then, counted against us and reduced our reimbursement from the
Okay,
state.
thank you.
I just wanted to clarify quickly, you'd mentioned this year, I know the overall, we're going to be net neutral, but for this year, you said there is a loss incurred, right, of 300,000?
Correct, and that's just because it's taken us the first half of the year, to get everything in place to actually eliminate these positions and make sure employees have a spot to land. So for the first year, we're only getting a half-year savings roughly on those reduced positions.
Got it. And as you've mentioned here, they're already accounted for elsewhere. They already have the new positions, they just haven't
Correct.
transferred yet. Okay.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions, discussion? All right, if we can go ahead and please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
Perfect, motion carries, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, next we've got Management and Budget, 2023 Oakland County Equalization Report, with the presenter, Mr. Lohmeyer. All right, I'll accept a motion to recommend this to the board. All right, Commissioner Smith Charles, and seconded by Commissioner Weipert. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Good afternoon, sorry.
Or good afternoon.
Our meeting's been longer today, so.
We've already been here an hour and 10 minutes. Well, good morning, I'm Michael Lohmeyer. And I think I know or have met everybody in the room except for yourself, Mr. Rahman. But I came from Novi last June, so I wish I would have met you before and welcome you to the committee. And I've met Mr. Hoffman. I welcome you to the committee. I am the equalization officer for Oakland County Equalization. And as Kyle mentioned, I'm certainly not the head of this report. I'm not going to take full credit for it because I'm just one of the chains of the team. I am here with two of our other leaders. I have Terry Schultz, who's with us. He's chief of the Equalization and Appeals Practice Area of Oakland County Equalization. And I have Tiffany Jacob, who actually heads our Equalization and Personal Property Practice Area. Both are Michigan Master Assessing Officers and have been with Oakland County Equalization for a very long time. And it's also a lot of other people at our area of equalization that went through a lot of the hard work and effort to put this report together. I apologize for not having a PowerPoint here today. We just came fresh out of March Board Review for all of our communities that we do assessment services for. We do 32 communities, or maybe 32 and a half, because we also do a lot of the work for City of Novi, where you're from. We work with the the assessing group there, doing the commercial industrial and overseeing the practice area, and I signed the role for that community as well. Our last community that provided some of the work for us was Oak Park, which was the last Wednesday of March. So they had 10 days to get the reports to us. So as you can tell, this just is hot off the presses, which is why we don't have a PowerPoint. So again, I do want to apologize for not having some kind of PowerPoint for you. We just put these together. So rather than having a PowerPoint, I'd just like to have maybe a conversation with you of what's really of importance in here that we kind of flagged that I think you should bring to your attention, that most people look for it in this report. And then I'll stand ready for any other questions that maybe you brought with you today. Just to let you know, we prepare this according to State Tax Commission requirements, which is the body of our agency at the state of Michigan that we're required to put things together for the requirements, but also to the standards professional practice that we have to, which is USPAP, in which every single member of our office, which is over 70 people, have all taken that class. We brought in somebody even after I got there, and a national instructor, and everybody went through that program together. So I'm very proud of the team we have at Oakland County Equalization. It's a great group of professionals. This report is extremely important because as we come out of the March Board of Review, this is the report that not only yourselves, but assessors, finance directors, people working on budgets, this is the report everybody refers to. You have an assessment role that we give to the March Board of Review members before they go into Board of Review. That's the official assessment role. But this is a report that we prepare for summer tax billing. This is a report people use when they compare other assessed value and taxable values to on an annual basis. Because values change over the years based on state tax commission changes, Michigan Tax Tribunal changes. When you're looking at tax collections, you're going to have PRE changes, principal residence exemption changes. You're going to have changes throughout the year. There's always going to be changes. But this is the one time a year where all counties prepare their equalization reports, and you compare this year to another's. So when somebody asks for community values or percentage change of values, this is the one report that is really important for people to have. So we're collecting reports from other counties right now across the state to see what values have changed in their areas. And some of the things I'm going to talk about are changes in personal property that we had, and I'm going to bring those to your attention because people are comparing what kind of changes they had for certain exemptions for eligible manufacturing personal property, what kind of changes they had to utility personal property that was filed, and what kind of significance that had. And we're going to be comparing that to next year if there's any significant changes. So this is a very important report. And I say this for not just to remind the commissioners here that have been here in the past, but maybe for some of the new commissioners that may not know that. So one of the things I want to bring to your attention is we do have a lovely picture on the front cover that we don't pick out, but we have a great communications department that takes these photos and they pull out of the stock. But I think a lot of people wonder about that picture of why do we select that picture? Well, we don't select it. We have people smarter than me that know about photography that take the pictures and they find a nice picture somewhere in the county to use. So sometimes people wonder why their community isn't selected for that. Well, we don't do that. Somebody else, again, we have a professional photographer somewhere in the county that goes and takes those pictures.
Good disclaimer.
Yeah, I don't want to take credit for being the photographer for our people. But it is a lovely picture. I do want to draw your attention to the table of contents, because this is really kind of the map of how to read, what's important in this book. And I'm only going to hit the highlights for you of what, when I would look at the book, what I thought was important and what other people have drawn their attention to. And again, I'm just going to hit the highlights of where maybe you could draw attention to. And then I'm only going to cover some things in about 5 minutes, and then I'll open myself up to questions. But I'm going to cover page 2 with you. Page 2 is just our certification of the recommended county values, and I'll show that to you. I'm going to talk about page 3 real quickly. When I get to that, that'll be the resolution that'll go before the Board of Commissioners. I'm going to talk about page 4 and 5. And when I talk about page 4 and 5 with you, I'm going to remind you of our friend Irma. Irma was a good friend to us this year. Why? Because of Proposal A, we didn't get the full effect of 7.9%, which was our CPI. And we had some residents call us because their taxable value went up 5%, and that was IRMA. They only got the 5%, they didn't get the 7.9%. And that's why they liked IRMA, which is the inflation rate multiplier, IRM. That was IRMA. So I'll remind you of that when we get to that page. I am gonna stop on page 7 because that'll give us a total equalized and taxable value chart that I'm gonna make you aware of. That's a pretty good chart to look at. And then I'm gonna draw your attention to page 9 because that is a distribution of taxable value in a nice illustration. And then I'm gonna look at pages 10 through 12, and that's kind of where I'm gonna finish the discussion at the end of the 5 minutes. And that's a comparison of assessed and taxable values by communities. And that's a nice place where a lot of people draw their attention. The rest of these pages are really important because it breaks down information in different ways. But you can look at a lot of those in different ways throughout the year. And a lot of time, if you have questions, don't hesitate to call me at any point, and I can give you further explanation of what all those things mean. One thing that I don't know if you'll have questions for today, but maybe another time, is the very last page. I think is important because I used to be the assessor for Auburn Hills, and you'll find we have the largest value of special acts, or i.e. abatements, which is that last page. Some communities really value abatements as a tool. Some people don't do abatements. Some people do abatements and have no clue what they're doing. And I found that to be true when I was at Auburn Hills. I found it to be true at Novi. I always extended myself to help people out because I did abatements at every single meeting at Auburn Hills. I didn't know it was a huge issue in Oakland County when I came here that people were doing abatements, they had no clue what they were doing. Just as a side note, we take a lot of responsibility not only for our communities that we assess, but for all the communities we equalize. So on August 15th, we actually, with Kyle's help and our leadership team's help, we actually have teamed up with the state of Michigan Department of Treasury. We're gonna bring in somebody that's from the state. We're gonna do some training. We're inviting one member of every single community. We're gonna help them develop a policy on how to do abatements. On our dime, we're gonna help them create out of best practices, create a policy. They don't have to do abatements, but even if you're going to deny abatement, you should have a policy. So people can't say you were wrongfully denied. That's how we did business in Novi. If we created policies, we brought other people in. That's how we did it at Auburn Hills. And with Kyle's help, with the administration's help, with our team's help, that's what we're doing here. We're doing the same thing in July with land divisions. Because again, there's communities that just don't have policies. Well, you should have a policy how you do things. So for abatements, we're doing that in August. We've already let a lot of the communities know, and we're doing that in July. And if we've already talked to people about special assessments, we'll do that after November. So that's one of the things we've implemented here. And people will understand why that's such an important page after we help them understand what abatements even are. Well, we've teamed up with the state of Michigan who's helping us do that. So I just wanted you to know that we're doing things outside of what we've done in the past. But a lot of this has come from Kyle's help, our leadership team's help, and a lot of our staff has helped because they have a lot of great talents. So if I can draw your attention again to page 2 and go through that table of contents laundry list, I'll go through real quickly why some of these pages I thought were important, and maybe you'll think they're important. Page 2 gives you a catalog of our classes of property. When I mean classes of property, these areas where you have values, those are the different classes of real property we have in Oakland County. Agricultural, commercial, industrial, residential. That's what we have for the total values for those properties. Personal property, we have 5 different classes of property too, but for equalization, we put them together as a total. Throughout the report, there's different areas that break them down, but this gives you the total for real and personal property individually and the total real and personal property as a total. And you'll see later that it did increase from last year. On the next page is the resolution of what we would present for next week meeting. And you'll see on that resolution, the assessed value did go up 8.86% from last year, and taxable value went up 7.52%. Now that's higher than the 5% IRMA, but the part of that is because you had uncappings of properties and you had some new construction in there. So it's always going to be higher than the inflation rate multiplier. You know, that's part of why you don't start to freak out when assessed values go down and inflation rate multipliers are going up still. Because you still have uncappings if it's a residential community, and you still have additions for something. So that'll be the resolution that would be written if this continues to go forward. Page 4 and 5 are informational pieces we put in there, and that pertains to you all. It's your districts and what your districts are, and the map color-coded, and the asterisks are for those serving on the Finance Committee. Page 6 is of importance because this actually shows, starting in 2016, going towards this year, the assessed value, or SEV, because SEV is, if you're, after it goes through state equalization, as long as you get a factor of 1, SEV and assessed value are the same thing. And we're assuming we're not going to get factored because our team does a great job, so I wouldn't expect us to get factored. As long as SEV and assessed value are the same, this is the difference between where we're at with taxable value and assessed value, which means if assessed value were to drop collectively, taxable value would still get that inflation rate multiplier. There's somewhat of a cushion between taxable value and assessed value. And as you can see, assessed value has grown at an outpacing the tax value basis. Page 7 just gives you the total state equalized and taxable values. On the left, you can see residential is a higher basis at 76.3% than, say, personal property at 4%. And then on taxable value, again, residential makes up 75% versus personal property at 5.2%. And then it breaks out industrial at 3.3%, commercial at 16.4% for real property basis. So you can see residential is a big part of our basis. Now, why should somebody care? Well, commercial, industrial, agricultural, that doesn't uncap as much as residential. That's why you have that outpacing the taxable value, because you get the uncapping and the growth, the new decks, the new additions. You don't get that with the commercial industrial, which means you can afford to make a few mistakes in those communities management-wise. But if you're a commercial industrial community, you can't outgrow some of the problems you have. I know that sometimes you don't think through that, but you can see certain communities that make mistakes and they don't outgrow those problems. And when you're looking at personal property, when we talk about personal property exemptions, and some of that's diminishing on a tax base, that's real problematic because a lot of people counted on depreciation of personal property to outgrow mistakes. So residential is a big reason why a lot of communities have succeeded in the past. On page 8, again, this is a comparison of real property state equalized value now and personal property state equalized value rather than totals. And on the bottom, you've got total real and personal property taxable values with real property taxable value on the left side. And now I wanted to bring this up again because I brought it up on the table of contents. The right side is just personal property taxable value. And personal property taxable value and assessed value are the same. You might have it on an individual basis where they're different, but all intents and purposes are always the same because they're always cataloged based on cost. So you're never going to have really a basis looking in this report where they're different. But I wanted to bring to your attention, overall, when you get into the report and you look at the values, overall you had a growth or an increase in personal property of 0.77%. If you look at this chart, utilities is the lion's share of this chart at 44.1%. Industrial is 7%, okay? Commercial is 48.9%. If you do the math later and you compare the 2 years, 22 to 23, commercial actually went down 3.4%. The industrial from 22 to 23 actually went down 2.24%. This year, utility actually went up 6.44%. If it wasn't for utilities this year, we wouldn't have had that small 0.77% increase countywide. And the reason I bring this up is we had a tremendous amount of decrease of personal property this year countywide because of the eligible manufacturing personal property exemption that got phased out finally in this 10th year. Plus, there was a small business taxpayer exemption expansion from $80,000 of assessed value to $180,000 of true cash value, true cash value. 80,000 to 180,000. And not everybody that was eligible applied that could have. I mean, if they didn't apply, that they were eligible, they missed the boat. So they'll apply next year when they find out, when they get their summer tax bill, they should have. That's what happened when it originally started, just like the EMPP folks. So some of them are gonna apply next year that found out that their accountant didn't apply for them. But this .77, it could have been a decrease if they would have applied. But the only thing kind of saving the personal property, getting the growth, was all the utilities. And you're gonna see that in a minute when I point you to some of them. I'm gonna give you a couple example communities, if you don't mind, where you'll see some big double-digit increases in personal property. That's why, I'll show you the reason why was the utilities. When you turn to page 10 is just a good total chart where you can see the totals of townships and cities, what their 22 assessed and taxable values are, and what their new 23 taxable and assessed values are. And we have the percentage change for each one of those communities worked out for you. And then you still have the totals at the very bottom where you see that 8.86% for the county and 7.52% that we saw given to you earlier on the resolution. And then on the next page, page 11, we start breaking it down, you know, into the individual, again, categories, like this is the bucket for the real property. Now, again, I wanted to point out just a couple communities so you could see it. If you pull out a couple like Lyon Township, they had a double-digit increase, a 14.15% increase for a taxable value change. One of the reasons it had a double-digit increase is they had a lot of residential development mixed with multifamily development, and we had some warehousing development. That's what led to it being a larger taxable value increase. Okay, because that goes with the Proposal A calculation. You add in additions, and that's where those additions came from. If you look for another double-digit increase under the cities, Hazel Park had some warehousing additions thrown into that calculation. Again, that's on top of the 5% IRMA. You go down to Pontiac, they had, again, residential, you had some multifamily, you also had warehousing. The next page is page 12. This is personal property. You had Lyon Township, the 13.83%. This was largely due to utilities with, again, IRMA is always going to be a part of it because you start off with the 5%. But as far as additions, you're going to have utilities is a big part of it. The next one down from it, Milford, we had a couple things there. You had the EMPP I talked about, eligible manufacturing personal property. You had the 180,000 expansion that they applied for. You also had a new exemption this year, which was the qualified heavy equipment manufacturing personal property exemption that they have to apply for every year. The EMPP is a one and done, so they apply for it, they're exempt going forward. This new one with the heavy equipment manufacturing, they have to apply for that every year if they have it in your community. That was one that Milford had. So that's why they're a big negative in the double digits. And that's where, again, some of these that had double-digit increases, another one that was in Milford was GM, had another, I think they were an EMPP. The one down in Farmington was actually the Siemens account. They just didn't have personal property. They had reported it the earlier year. It wasn't there, so it came off this year. Pleasant Ridge, all of the ones that had big double-digit ones, 29% in Pleasant Ridge. Again, that's utilities that caused that big increase. It's a small community, so utilities was a big one this year. Again, that was only a net 0.77 increase. The rest of the report is just taking that information and putting it in different comparison uses. That's all that is. These are the main pages, though, that most people draw their attention to because it's giving it to you in different areas and different ways of looking at it, and fresh ways. But as I say, this is the report that everybody refers to because it has all the communities. It gives you 2022, 2023. And other than the very last page, this gives you the real property, personal property, and breaks it down by the classes. A little bit later, we do break it down by residential, commercial, industrial class with the total numbers, but it's just looking at it differently. And with that, I'll stand ready to answer any other questions that maybe I didn't answer already. Yes?
Thank you. Love this kind of stuff. One of the, excuse me. One of the things, I have 3 things written down. I apologize for not being brief. Abatements. Do you involve the local schools in these communities when you're reaching out to municipalities? Because as former treasurer of a school board, I would get those bills asking me to come up with $1.2 million and had to be paid in 30 days.
I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah.
It's the local community is required to do the abatement process. And when I was at Novi in Auburn Hills, you are required by statute to send all the affected taxing authorities, all the, if you're gonna do a district, and then you're gonna do the actual abatement to the council or the board, you have to send them that information that they're being affected when those meetings are. And you have to put it in the paper if you have them. There's certain requirements, so we had a policy, and we had all the affected mailing addresses to send them those letters. So yes, you have to send the schools, is one of them, that's an affected taxing authority. And I spoke to the Oakland County School Board a month ago, and tonight, I'm speaking to the Oakland County School Board Government Relations at 6:30.
Oh, good.
With Phil Boone, who is Department of Education, and he's explaining the formula. So I'm glad you asked this.
Yeah.
Now, many of the people on the school board that I talked to earlier were receiving letters, because I asked them. I can tell you, since I've been at the county, I'm amazed at how many don't have policies where it's written down and they have the papers saying, when we have a district that's gonna go to the board, send the letters. When you have the application going to the board, send the letters to these folks. I thought everybody did it, because I was just a lowly assessor doing the community work, and it was a given. Not a lot of communities are doing what they're supposed to, which is why we're bringing these people in August, and we're going to every community in Oakland County and saying, we've got that executive conference room available. We're gonna have, and this is the way we're doing it. We wanna have a bottom in the seat, not virtual, but a bottom in every seat. And we'll help you, help yourself create this policy, because I'm not getting the letters, but people are having meetings. Kyle might not be getting the letters, but people are having meetings. I can guarantee you, schools are not getting the letters, but people are having meetings, meaning they're approving things too.
Right.
And I'm not gonna sign things if I'm the assessor, if they're not having meetings. Same thing with land divisions. We don't process land divisions, we just do parcel numbers.
Yeah.
So you gotta go through these processes correctly, but that's why we're taking it upon ourselves to do a best practice meeting with, usually you wanna have 8 or 10 people, but we'll do it with everybody. We'll pay for everything, because we don't want things to have, illegal activities, right? So you are by law required to give the taxing authorities a right to come to the hearings. Now, I can tell you in all my years at Auburn Hills and Novi, I never had a school board or official come to a meeting, but they are required to be given a right. They're required to be given the notice and a right to be heard.
Yeah.
Mr. Lomar, thank you so much. We appreciate the presentation. Just in the interest, we have quite a few topics still to discuss. Anything else that we need to cover before we vote? Yes, sir.
I know that as the Board of Commissioners, we're charged with voting to certify that these assessments are all assessed uniformly at true cash value. I have a real problem with it, because I truly believe there's so much in Oakland County over-assessed. How would you respond to that? Because I really have a hard time voting for this.
I don't think we're over-assessed at all, because everything's coming in between 49.1 and 49.99. But I'll add to that. One of the things that we're doing to increase quality of what we're doing is a lot of us we've taken upon ourselves to make sure every member is taking USPAP, which is the standard that every private appraiser requires, and everybody is taking it. We have some people that have taken upon themselves to get appraiser training licenses, and we're trying to create more use of MLS for different areas. And people are taking education and private appraisal classes. And I've only been there 9 months, so a lot of this is new. We're doing everything we can to interact with brokers and appraisers, and we're doing whatever we can to increase quality. But for this equalization report, everything overall came in between 49.1 and 49.99.
Okay, maybe I should ask the question about, because I watch home sales lots of times, and I know the sales study is like 2 years old, right?
Right.
I see some homes that are being sold for less than 2 times SEV, so they're being overassessed, and I don't remember any of them, the current ones, but I've looked at some of those, but I remember in 2017, Bloomfield Hills and Oakland Township homes that sold for more than $500,000, 50 to 60% of those were selling for less than 2 times SEV. So that means either prices are dropping, and I don't think so, or they're overassessed. That's the problem I have.
Yeah, well, we've got the board review where people can appeal, and then they can go to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. And one of the things I didn't know why is if we had pockets of appeals in an area, I would look at with our residential assessor and say, if there's a lot of appeals, we're gonna look at that area for ECFs and other things going forward. And that's one thing we do. And I think the more of our staff members that can look at MLS and more involvement we can get with quality of information and using pictometry and other things, and that's some of the things we're doing. So we are gonna start employing a lot of things that I've learned through private practice at our level, and I've had nothing but great receptivity of our staff of how to increase quality. So everything I've done in the past in assessing, our leadership team and people we have at the staff have been pretty active and involved with also wanting to increase quality. We've already had a few people get appraiser training licenses and join the North Oakland County Board of Realtors. So I think you'll see an improvement. I'm not saying we did anything wrong, but I think we'll see improvement of taxpayer involvement, improvement of broker and appraiser involvement with a lot of our people, which we've already been doing. And I think you'll see over time, improvement of other technology like RealComp and MLS and other appraisal tools, like going to International Council of Shopping Centers in April. We've got a couple of us going to that. But with residential data like MLS, there's already a few of us that are members of the board, and we're already making changes with small claims appeals and other things. I think you'll see a year from now, more improvement.
Yeah, I do appreciate everything you're doing, and I'm glad you're here with Oakland County.
I appreciate that.
Commissioner-
And I would
Commissioner-
invite, if I could say one last thing, I would invite every member of the Board of Commissioners and anybody else, if you have suggestions, I welcome them, because I'll do anything to increase involvement and quality, anything.
Thank
Commi-
you.
Commissioner White, you had a question?
So you see a trend of improvement. On some of this, like where you saw the utilities accounted for, and of course, we can see new growth and home sales, but is there a way of predicting the utilities going to continue with that number next?
I don't know if, I don't think, personally, I don't know why utilities is gonna be an increase next year. That's why I said I think we need to really watch it, because I think the EMPPs and the exemptions are gonna continue, because I don't think everybody applied for them. I don't know why you would have a big increase for utilities next year. I don't know why, but I'm not that smart.
All right, thank you.
Don't give
Thank
yourself
you.
some slack.
Thank you so much. Are we ready to, any other discussion? Commissioners? All right. Let's go ahead and please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 4 yeas, 1 nay.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bobby Hoffman.
Moving on, next we have item D, Information Technology Extension for 1 year with Northstand for SL 100 phone service support. We have a presentation from Mr. Sean Carlson. Do I have a motion?
Move it.
All right, all right. Moved by Commissioner Whitebird, seconded by Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm joined with our Chief Technology Officer from IT, EJ Wyden is joining me as well, in case you have any detailed questions in regards to this. This is pretty straightforward. We're asking for an extension on this contract. So we're still working on the voice over IP. We're not asking for a budget amendment here. It's just an extension on the contract. We've got contingency funds that are set aside. So welcome any questions you have, but it's pretty straightforward.
It's the best kind of request.
Just a quick question.
Please.
So it's all still same terms and conditions and,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Extending it, okay.
that's correct.
All right, any further discussion?
Sure. One quick one, which is, this is a phone system?
Yeah.
And is it voice over internet or?
It's moving to voice over internet. We finished the campus phones. These are the legacy things left behind on an old copper line system or just an old box that needed to be remediated out.
Okay. And I've been told from cybersecurity experts I should be asking a question like uptime and any vulnerabilities that we've seen in the past that just need to be made aware of for you all, not so much for us.
For voice over IP, we have that mitigated through a series of security controls, and we actually do an annual audit of the provider of that service.
Yeah.
For the pieces that we're finishing this off with, they will still be on a legacy technology as we build a new approach to solve for that. It is not the things that are left behind that Sean and I are cleaning up, just deal with things that are not ready to go voice over IP at this date.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, let's go ahead and please prompt the vote.
We're going to put you on Mr. Hoffman. Silence that. Just push the button on the
Mr. Chair, you
side.
have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, perfect. Motion carries. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, moving on. Public Health and Safety Committee recommendations. Item A, Prosecuting Attorney's Office requests to use forfeiture funds. Do we have a presentation on this?
I'll move it.
All right. Moved by, I think, Commissioner Long and seconded by Commissioner Smith-Charles. Do we have a presentation here, or Ms. Hage?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm David Williams. I'm the Chief Assistant at the Prosecutor's Office. I'm joined by Betsy Haig, who's our Chief of Administration.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is our request to use forfeiture funds from drug forfeitures for a couple of purposes within our office. These are funds that they're already in an account for our office, but we come to the board each year with a request to use some of those. The fund right now has around $600,000 in it. I think last year we sought about $70,000 for training. This year we're seeking $100,000 from the fund, $10,000 to fund work on the Commission to Address Gun Violence in Oakland County. That's a commission that's already been formed. It's expected to release a report in July, and these funds will help us get the word out and support the work of the commission between now and then. We requested $60,000 for training. You all may recall, but for about a decade, this office did not send assistant prosecutors to training with some of the major prosecutors groups, including the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan, the National District Attorneys Association, and a newer association we joined called the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. Those programs are valuable. We're playing catch up. I think we have a small part of our county budget for training, but we're still catching up, and we're sending a lot of APAs to training, and we're using these funds for that. And then finally, $30,000 for equipment on an as-needed basis. As you all know, technology continues to change. Juries expect to see sort of the latest technology. This committee and the commissioners have supported us. We've actually really updated our technology here, but these funds would allow us to do additional things during the year if we have a case or a trial where additional technology will be valuable. And we're happy to take any questions.
I just have one quick question here. With the aggregate of 100,000 and the way it's broken down, how does this compare to previous years, if there has been such efforts put forward in prior calendar years?
So I think for about 12 years it didn't happen. Betsy, do you have the numbers from last year?
I believe last year we requested $110,000.
And it was primarily training and equipment. I think we included $10,000 last year to help fund a software program that stores videos from CareHouse. And I apologize, I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, but largely the same distribution as what you're requesting now. Is that correct?
It's very similar, correct?
Correct.
Any other discussion? All right, if everybody's good, let's go ahead and please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item B, Sheriff's Office, acceptance of the fiscal year 2023 Michigan Economic Development Corporation Enhancement Project. Can I have a motion, please? All right, motion by Commissioner Long, seconded by Commissioner Hoffman. Hello.
Good afternoon. We also have Lieutenant Workman on video.
Thank you
this
for your
afternoon.
patience. I know it's been a little bit of a wait here, but we appreciate it.
I'll try to be brief. So the first item for the MEDC, this is really good news. It's new funding for Marine patrols. So I think we've had this conversation over the last couple of years that we need additional Marine patrols. A couple of years ago, we got a grant for slow no-wake patrols. That was a one-year grant. Last year, the board gave us an additional $50,000 to patrol high-volume lakes. This year, we have this $250,000 for 147-ish for marine patrol, almost 80,000 for boats, some motor pool costs, and then some marine maintenance supplies. So what we're hoping is instead of getting additional funding from the board this year, we can defer that to later years since we just anticipate this for 1 year. So we're here to ask for your acceptance.
All right, any questions, discussion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and please prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
Excellent, motion carries, thank you. And we're moving on to item C, Sheriff's Office continuation of positions for countywide active assailant incident training, 2-year pilot program, 2nd-year funding. Moved by Commissioner Smith-Charles, seconded by Commissioner Hoffman.
Okay, so we're here, as the title states, to ask for the 2nd year of funding for this program. The original resolution approved 3 full-time Deputy 2 positions. This was in response to the Oxford incident and to provide more countywide training. So in the back of the packet, there is a report that was required for us to submit from the original resolution. So the commissioners could see what type and the volume of training that we've performed. And then we were also required to come back for the 2nd year of funding. So that's what we're asking for today.
Yeah. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. It is unfortunate that we need it, but if it's being put to a good purpose and it's being useful for our communities, I think it's really important. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
Perfect, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your patience.
I don't know who's been watching the dogs out there
All right, moving on to EDIC recommendations. We've got 10A, Facilities Management, Renovation, Expansion of Outdoor Kennel Project for the Animal Shelter. And we have Mr. Gatt here with us. Thank you again for rejoining us.
Well,
Commissioner Whiteburn, seconded by Commissioner Smith-Charles.
yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to be brief since most of you already heard my presentation this morning. What I am here to do is seeking your permission to proceed with the project to expand our beautiful shelter with 19 outdoor pens that will be attached to our building and located on the east side of our building in the large fenced-in play yard that we have now. By adding these pens, we will be adding a sense of efficiency to the shelter. The cleaning will be better. The dogs will be able to be outside on a much more readily basis, which hopefully will make for a more adoptable animal. We've been working with our FM&O team prudently for the past couple of years on this project. We've had the architects involved. The great news is that financially, there's no monies coming out of the general fund. The project is approximately a $2 million endeavor. About $1 million of that will come from the Oakland County Animal Shelter Legacy Fund, which is our donation fund. About $500,000 will come from unused ARPA money, and another $500,000 will come from unexpended funds from the original project at the building. We're hoping that you approve that and we can move forward with this project.
Perfect, thank you. Commissioner Hoffman?
I support it. I just have to tell you, I can't believe what stuff costs. $2 million.
Any other discussion?
No comment.
Any other discussion? Mr. Gadd, I was just going to quickly ask you, I know at the previous meeting there was some request for additional information. I don't know if that was still forthcoming. I just wanted to clarify that one point.
Well, I believe my team behind me will send drawings of the project. I did talk to Commissioner Spiz after the last meeting. He had a question about whether the unexpended funds from the original project could be used on any other project. And the answer I got from our finance director was no.
Okay.
That money could only be used on that project to enhance it.
Perfect, okay, very good. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? All right, let's go ahead and please prompt the vote. Beautiful.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
Excellent, motion carries, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Yeah, they did say it was gonna be windy today.
All right, with that, I will accept a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of consulting with attorneys regarding trial or settlement strategy in the case of Oakland County v. Teva National and others. Can I get a motion?
That motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Smith-Charles, seconded by Commissioner Long. All right, let's go ahead and please prompt the vote. We can prepare the committee room for closed session.
Prompt the vote.
Thank you, Pam.
It's all he said, rock the
Live again. I just texted the AV. Okay, but I gotta join. Okay, I'm ready. Okay.
All right, we are now back in open session. I'll accept a motion to forward the recommendation of council to the board. Motion by Commissioner Hoffman, seconded by Commissioner Weipert. If you could please prompt the vote.
It's a hard day at the office.
So the motion was,
Weibert?
I didn't say, but I mean, that's a motion to proceed in accordance with the discussion.
Correct.
Just recommend to go, yeah.
Well, it's a recommending it.
You get it right.
Yeah.
Lots of presentations, and so we got a late start this.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, perfect. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. All right, I think the next portion is public comment. So is there anyone who wishes to speak to the Finance Committee on any topic? All right, hearing none, public comment is closed. Is there any other further business to come before the Finance Committee today? All right, hearing none without objection, I call this meeting adjourned at 1:10 PM.
Good job.
Good job.
Jay did a nice job.